Welcome to the Changing Channels podcast, brought to you by the Mile High Flood District and the Learning Community Advisory Council. I'm Laura Kroeger. I'm the Executive Director of the Mile High Flood District, and joining me today is Mickey Conway, the Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the Metro Water Recovery. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And our topic to discuss is leadership. Okay. And I always find it interesting that we were asked by the Advisory Council to do this session. But in my head, I always think that we're all leaders. And I think you've got some similar feelings to that. The fact that I think of leadership as bringing out the best in others. And that's something we can all do every day. But there are positions that have leadership as more of the focus. And obviously, you're in that role with Metro. Yep. And I'm guessing, though, with your background, you didn't decide one day that you wanted to lead a water recovery district. So how did you get here?
Yeah, I did not dream of being the boss of the sewer district. Although
I love that you say sewer district, because I was being very careful not to say that.
You're not supposed to say that. It's supposed to be wastewater or clean water, and there's good reasons to not say that. But it also, I think, sometimes connects with people when they're not really understand what you're talking about. So no, I didn't dream about it, but I'm so happy that I ended up here. And the route was, one of those things you wouldn't have picked or predicted. I'm an attorney and I was a litigator, did all sorts of complex construction litigation, which is extremely boring at its core. But I learned a lot, and then I happened to get involved in a project that was a water project.
Okay.
And they were building a wastewater facility. And once I met the people who were running that place and the people who were working there, I was so impressed with the mindset and the public service devotion and the expertise that they all had. And they were very humble and very funny people. So I thought, this is where I want to end up. So That's how it started.
That's excellent. I have the privilege of serving on the Metro board with you. And so it's been 5 years since we've known each other. And I've very much appreciated your leadership style. And wondering if you could describe what you think your style is. And then I'll tell you if I think it's the same.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good. I have a good check on this. I think I like to be a listener first. I've learned, and that's a skill that I've developed. Communication is such a critical element of leadership, and listening is the first part of it. So I like to listen, and I like to be very supportive, even when we've got to have tough messaging or we've got mistakes to correct or things to course alter. I want to talk about what we're doing right and how we could just build on that as opposed to being sort of more negative. So I tried to be a bit of a cheerleader, I guess. My pre-work background was heavily sports kind of involved, and I just loved a team dynamic. I love being part of a team. I love being a leader on a team. I love seeing how everyone could move one thing from one place to another. So I think a lot about that when I'm at work because I think it's really similar.
Yeah, I love that style about you. And when I heard you're an attorney, you don't exhibit some of that ego that oftentimes you think about with lawyers. But I think you're a very humble servant when I see, and you're very present with the team, whether it's the board or your own staff. And I think that's really meaningful. And when we talk about how that brings out the best in them, it's because you see them and you see their value and you really acknowledge that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I see that in you too.
Do you?
Yes.
We're talking about you today, Mickey.
Oh, okay. It's not as interesting.
So what do you think are the main practices that you bring that helped you get to the success where you've had today?
Definitely communication skill. I mean, that's something I've had as part of my, arsenal, even growing up. So refining that. And again, the listening thing, I think is such a big part of that. Once you package the being able to communicate and lay out ideas in a way that people can grasp, and you already listened, I think that works really well. I think the other thing is curiosity. That really helps. And going into a situation where, if you hear something that sort of makes you clench up and say, you're really off track, stopping that feeling from happening and saying, I'm going to be totally open to what this person is telling me. Because most of the time, you're not as right as you think you are. And you find that out. And being curious allows you to be better because you could assimilate more ideas and communicate those and implement them. So I think that's something that I've been working on a lot that has been helpful.
And I think that's just a lifelong journey, that growth mindset.
It is.
And I do agree with you, that curiosity piece, that we all come in with something, but everybody else is also there for a really good reason. And finding out what that reason is really brings that collaborative spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those qualities. One of the things that we talk a lot about, it seems like in some leadership circles lately, is some of the generational challenges we're having. Yeah. And I know when I came into the workforce, and I'm a Gen Xer, that there wasn't much conversation, but as soon as the millennials came in, it's like, oh my goodness, we've got 4 generations in the workforce. But I feel like that's coming back around again. And I'm wondering what your experience is that you're seeing at Metro.
That's such an interesting question. I agree. I think when we started working, we didn't think that those types of divisions, and I don't want to use the word division, that's probably the wrong word. Generations didn't really exist. It was just a bunch of people working. And part of that was, I think, the baby boomers were put your head down, don't question things.
Yeah.
Work really hard, finish the job and don't complain about it. At least that's how I saw my parents and things like that. And our generation was pretty much like that.
Yeah,
we might have secretly complained about the heat or something. They probably didn't. But now that I see that there's these different perspectives or worldviews that are shaped by the experiences that the different groups have had, it just seems like an opportunity to find the best or most, focused pieces of those to go towards that common thing. And the one thing about, working in public service is that most, if not all, the people who come to work for us really care about the work that we're doing. It means a lot to them.
Yeah.
And the younger generations are especially focused on that, right? They really get a lot of value out of what we do and feeling like they're contributing something to society. So really making sure that they're connecting to that is really important. The older generations, that's important for them, but sometimes they just need to be reminded of it a little bit more, I think. But that is one thing that everybody has in common, I think. So
I think that's a great point. And I think that's a leadership quality that is essential, is how do you give that aspirational vision, like something that we all are excited to work towards. And I think Metro's focus the last several years through you has been on how do we provide clean water, right, back to our community? How do we make it safer? That really resonates. And I like the fact of it's not always how we get there, but that we get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think when we talk about generational issues, it's how people want to get there. And maybe we shouldn't focus so much on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
And I also don't know if the generations is that much different than working in a diverse team.
Right.
And how do you bring the value of all those perspectives for the benefit versus the hindrance?
Yeah, I think if people are comfortable enough to be authentic and show you what's important to them, regardless of the characteristic, if you can bring that out, it's going to make everything stronger because they're going to contribute something that is going to add to the whole thing. And certainly the value of experience, for instance, like some of our older employees are more seasoned, I guess. I mean, I'm one of the older employees now, so I guess I can say that. You see some of them working directly with the Gen Z, is that what it is now? Mm-hmm. And it's super cool because the Gen Zs are just lapping it up. They're soaking up all that knowledge. And the older employees are wanting to really impart that and teach people. And so it's really cool to see that cross-pollination of those groups.
And I think the culture that you've set the tone for, which is so much of modeling the way through yourself, of when you show that curiosity, that aspirational vision, and valuing everyone's perspective, I think that really does trickle through the whole agency. And then you're more comfortable to become vulnerable, to be authentic. Yeah. And I really do think that's the key pieces of how do you help people be at their best.
Yeah.
So it's really fun to watch the transition that we've seen.
Thanks.
Now, this is really a fun question.
Okay.
What's been one of the most painful lessons you've learned along the way?
You got a lot of time for this?
Yeah. Should we stop recording?
Every mistake that you make, especially the big ones, turn out to sometimes be the best thing ever happened to you when you develop. Mm-hmm. Right? And so sometimes you look back on that stuff and it's not as painful as it probably was in the moment.
Yeah.
You think, I came out of that. I learned that. I think, without getting into specific examples, because, some of them might be, kind of too specific. I think one is just learning that bright light transparency is the most important thing. And I think sometimes as a younger employee or leader, you're going to make mistakes, and you make mistakes, and sometimes you have the urge to fix the mistake right away. And it's not like you're covering anything up. It's just that you're diving into the solutions without thinking of maybe who you should be letting know about the situation. So you can come to them and say, I made a mistake and I fixed it.
Yeah.
Sometimes on very small things and things that are time tracked, that's a great plan. But there are other times where people who are not involved in the situation find out about it in a different way, and you learn that that is the worst possible scenario for you. So you're trying to do the right thing in a different way. I think just owning up and saying, I made a mistake, and just living with it, and immediately saying, now here's my plan to correct it. And then you have a partner instead of somebody who's a potential adversary, and your boss or your stakeholder or whoever it is.
I think that's a really good insight, because we don't like making mistakes, but unfortunately that's part of the learning process.
Absolutely.
We can't grow without doing that. And I know when I've made mistakes in the past, I've always been given grace. And I feel like, especially in our industry, we do give grace. And so being comfortable enough to be able to show that and demonstrate that you learned something, I think it's actually the greater value overall, and I think very supported.
I agree. I mean, and the other thing that it's taught me is that the people who work for me are going to make mistakes, and I empower them to the extent that their mistakes are going to have some, we're going to have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And that turns out to be the best ultimate possible scenario, because they have the power to make the decisions. When they make the mistake, they come to me and we say, let's dig into it. What are we going to do? And they always get stronger, and they always learn something. And I had the same situation that you did. The people who were watching over me and mentoring me, they helped me with that. They didn't jump on me and said, you made a mistake, you're an idiot. I mean, they probably did something. But that turns out to create a strong organization when people know that they can venture out far enough that, their judgment might result in a mistake, but they can correct it and build the whole structure stronger.
Yeah. And I do think there's a little bit to us as owners having mistakes. And I've heard from some of our consultant firms that we work with that it's not so easy for them on the private side, because their reputation's on the line. And so I always think how can we help that? How can we front it? Because we do want them to continue to experiment and innovate and learn, which may appear as, things didn't go as planned, but there's acceptance to that, and there's learning in it.
Yeah. I mean, in the public sector, it's sometimes difficult because you're using public funds. You're a steward of those funds, and when you make mistakes, the perception can be, you wasted my money.
Yeah.
And that's a valid viewpoint. But as we, for all of us who've been in this business a long time, usually those missteps are part of building much greater value in the long run.
Yes.
And so you just have to your communication skill has to lock in there and explain, that this is not, we have to be able to allow for this.
And I think you and your team have done a fabulous job with that, because one of the things that I love about Metro is that technology innovation branch.
Yeah.
And that's not something you find in most public agencies or in utilities. But, I mean, having that world recognition of what is done here in the Denver metro area is amazing. And so I think it goes to your risk tolerance and growth mentality. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add to that of how you set that program up and the benefits you've seen?
I think the biggest thing is to get the support of the people who are the leaders of the organization, the board of directors, the stakeholders. Once they support that and they understand that this investment is a longer term investment, it makes it makes the staff feel supported enough to make the decisions and go down the roads they need to go. So I think that building that high level support, and our board has been pushing innovation. I think they realized we were able to show some dramatic savings on a couple of our innovation projects. And so once we had that kind of, set out as a success story, it helped a lot. But I think that's one of the biggest things. You've got to get the buy-in at the people at the top, and then you can support it all the way through.
And I think what you guys do really well, it's not just the initial buy-in. You give progress updates and you show the success that you really ingrain that mentality with the board. So even new board members who didn't have that past experience are very connected and supportive of the mission that you guys have set forward. So I do think that skill that you have from the very beginning, you said, of communication and doing that all the way through. And I think also what you do really well is we're talking about really complex things that the majority of us on the board don't understand, but your team does such a great job articulating it in such a a straightforward, as simple as they can way, it's always an impressive feat. So totally appreciate it as a board member.
Yeah, they're incredible at that.
Especially.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think about, you've had to testify in front of the committees at the Senate and the House, and I think you do a great job carrying that message. And do you kind of have another skill set when you think about regulation and policy that is so much part of your business? What's your strategy and how you've spoken well about how to be more, sustainable in our thinking when it comes to regulation?
Yeah. In our business, same for you guys, we are really driven by regulatory compliance issues. And sometimes regulators and lawmakers make laws and regulations that are difficult to comply with. And so trying to get in there early to shape the regulation becomes, more and more critical in terms of value to the ratepayers and the burden on the ratepayers.
Yes.
And the ultimate outcomes, right? Sometimes a regulation is not going to end up with an outcome that really is worth the cost of complying with the regulation. And so, they're going to hear from lots of different camps on that. And relationships just turn out to be everything in this business, and this part of the business. Building and maintaining relationships with the lawmakers and the regulators and the experts that advise them is 99% of the game. Because without the trust, you're never going to get to the place where you can challenge them a little bit. And they need to be challenged. And they'll admit it too, because they're not experts at what we do. And so that's it to me. Building relationships, maintaining them, it takes a lot of time, takes effort, but it's been worth it in almost every case.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a great insight, relationships. And I actually think relationships and leadership are just, you can't split those two apart. Yep. But when you're trying to influence something, if you don't have that trust factor and that connection, it's really hard to have any ears and listening with that. What specifically have you done to build those relationships? I know you're part of NACWA, National Association of Clean Water Agencies.
Yep.
Is that a key way to do that?
At the federal level, absolutely. Yeah, because they have the access. So this year I'm the president of NACWA, which helps a lot. I've been in the executive committee for a couple of years. NACWA is basically the advocacy arm for all of our clean water agencies across the country in DC. They also do state advocacy, but mostly DC. So they know everybody at EPA. They know all the congressional delegations. They know all the staffers. And so when we need access, they can provide that. So that helps a lot. Having that initial door opened is a big deal. And of course, we know our local folks really well, our congresspeople, senators. But using the door openers that you have is a big thing. That's important. If you want to get into a good party, somebody else is going to have to get you in. And then once you're there, there's nothing wrong with even starting meetings with, hey, how can we help you? And that could be the whole meeting.
Yeah, versus what you're doing wrong.
Well, or an ask, right? So not necessarily coming in right away with an ask, coming in with, how can I help you guys do what you do? This is the kind of stuff we do, and it seems that you need expertise. I have people who know this stuff back and forth. Rely on us, call us. Yeah. We can send you information. We can help you. Seems you're working on these 3 laws. Those are things that we think we could help you with, and we support. So sometimes if you come in with, hey, how can we help? That helps you get to the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to come in with a hard ask, and it just is what it is. And then, just trying to socialize that the way you would socialize anybody else. You don't want to pounce on them. You don't want to be all over them right away. You want to talk about what you have in common and find the things that are valuable and valued to them. And then you try to connect those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And going back to that, we all should be focused on leadership and focusing on relationships and building them as we go along in our profession.
Yeah.
Does so much for you in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that perspective. I asked you what your most painful, but what's been your proudest moment in the world that you're in right now?
I had so many of them, but it's kind of like being a parent, and it's going to sound bad, but what do you most proud moments is in a family or your kids?
Yeah.
I don't mean that my senior staff and all the people working here are like my kids, but when they have success, you just feel so great. And we recently were able to pull off something that was a lot of input, a lot of work from different groups. And the result of it is going to be that the Metro is going to be able to set out a 20 or 30-year plan, long horizon, impactful plan that's going to take care of community needs in a way that no one in Colorado has done. And it's called an integrated plan. And it's a super cool concept. And CDPHE, the Department of Health and Environment, worked with us, continues to work with us really closely. They've been very collaborative and very open to this. And the source, getting to this was, the problem before was that the way the permit cycles work and what you have to, it was too reactive. Mm-hmm. And as we all know, if you're just reacting to things, it's not the best value for the people you're building for, right? If you're planning and you're proactive, those are always the best long-term things. You're not stranding infrastructure. Everything you're building makes sense. It's sequenced the right way. And so I must have had 5-6 major groups of Metro work on this in kind of a constellation level plan that we put together. And we pulled it off. And it's not done by any means. And we're just to the point where they're going to be willing to accept a submission of a plan. But getting there and seeing all the people doing all the work that they did and being so proud about the work that they did and being so effective at the work they did, I mean, that's a great day. When you go home at the end of that day, you're like, that was great.
Yeah. Now, you come across as you really enjoy being at the district.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't beat that. I love the thinking that hope is not a strategy. And so I feel like that is something that you have led very well, is how do you have that strategic foresight and not just hope that things are going to get better, regulation's going to get better, somehow things are going to get easier. It's like, let's anticipate it, let's plan for it, come up with a strategy.
Yeah. The other thing, though, that's sort of always humbling about planning is that things change while you're in the plan. But if you have the right mindset, you can incorporate those changes in a way that makes you look good.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Nothing ever goes as planned.
No.
Yeah.
No,
but you can't go without anything. Yeah.
Part of the fun.
No doubt. Is there anything specific that makes you most hopeful about the future?
Yeah. I think people make me hopeful. No matter where I go or what I've ever done, I have always found tons of people who are so into trying to make things better. Whether it's this little thing they're working on their job, bigger things, and they're into it. Mm-hmm. They like that. And we have a lot of people like that at Metro, which is great. But I think there's a lot of people like that everywhere. Yep. And I also think that I'm an optimist when it comes to the social world we live in. And I know the United States, especially right now, is probably going through some, with some level of polarization. At least that's how it likes to be. People like to cast it.
Right.
But when you get to know people, regardless of where they're coming from, they're always, most of them pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. They care about the people, taking care of the people around them. And they also care about taking care of the wider group that we live with.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's changed. I think it's going to continue to kind of buck the trend of, hey, everybody hates each other. I don't believe that. I mean, maybe I'm an idiot. Probably am, but I am hopeful because of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. When you listen to the news and you see such polarization, but then your everyday interactions, and even people that I know have, stronger, different views, at the heart, we really kind of believe in the same thing.
Yeah.
And the more focus we can put on that versus these differances,
yes.
I think we can make a significant impact. Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your conversation. What I've pulled from this is that communication is pretty key to leadership, right?
Yeah.
Having that growth mindset is the other one. And I think that the focus on that relationship, the people part, and I think those are qualities and skills that all of us can be working on all the time.
Yeah.
And as we rise up in our positions and you take on more of this leadership as a role, I think those skills really come into play for us.
Agreed.
Yes. Anything you want to share for the end of this?
I would like to say that the cooperation and collaboration amongst the agencies that are associated with protecting our environment, especially the water side, has been one of the great developments, I think, in the last 20 years in Colorado. And Mile High Flood District is a big example of that. And Denver Water and Aurora Water and all the local water providers and the South Platts and the Metros, everybody's talking to each other and everybody's listening to each other.
Yes.
And it's made a big difference.
I agree. Starting in this industry, I'm just going to say 25 plus years ago,
Right.
that everyone was pretty siloed and everyone kind of had their own fiefdom. Yep. And I think it's been through transition of leadership in those organizations that put in collaboration and relationship building that we are making so much more progress in how we can better leverage our resources, our people, and provide a better quality of life, truly, to the people that we all serve.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
All right.